Hello and welcome to the Cuphead version 1.15 or 1.1 plus any percent advanced tutorial. My name is Grandiose and I currently have the world record as of making this tutorial with a 27:33. The plan of this video is to share a lot of my knowledge and tips and tricks and different stuff that can hopefully help you also push your times down further and further. Now, this is an advanced tutorial, so there will be a link in the description below for the beginner intermediate tutorial. I recommend starting there, as this tutorial will assume that you do know the basics to a degree. You know, you already know how to down patch and that, you know, future patches like 1.2 and 1.3 with the DLC and such, it patched out the double damage Lobber EXs and stuff like that. I'm gonna assume you're gonna know all those things. Even if you are running on newer patches, though, this tutorial can still be useful information. But yeah, just know that some things are a little bit different if you aren't able to down patch to version 1.15. Now, in this video here, I also am going to assume that you have this Cuphead debug mod on. It's amazing. Lets you get cards, have invincibility, have a level selector. It gives you RNG control for some fights, which is incredibly useful for learning and practice. There's even hitboxes you can enable with Control H on the keyboard. And yeah. There will be, like I said, a link in the description below for that. Also, I do have an input display here. I'm running purely default controls on controller, except my dash and my EX buttons are swapped. So I have EX on Y, dash on B. Otherwise, it's just shoot X, jump A, weapon swap on left bumper, and right bumper is the lock. So without further ado, let's get right into some tech here. All right, so first piece of tech I want to talk about is optimizing your Lobber Traps. So as you know, a Lobber Trap is just shooting lobbers typically straight up, get them bouncing, and then when a boss comes in, a new phase or whatever, they get blasted with all these lobbers. It's a good way to make use of downtime while you're waiting on a boss to do something. So, kind of one important thing to know is that a lobber dies on the third time it touches the ground. So, the lobbers will last longer the higher up they are, so jumping while doing them is obviously good. And there's kind of like a good bread and butter kind of general lobber trap that you're going to use most of the time. And what this is, to kind of like maximize all these things, what this is right before the peak of your jump, you start holding shoot until two lobbers come out. So something like that. And the reason you don't do it at the peak of your jump is this happens. See how the first lobber's really high up, but then the next one's pretty low to the ground? This kind of like staggers them in a weird way that doesn't work out too well. So to kind of maximize the height on both of these lobbers per jump, you want to do it right before the peak of your jump. It just lines it up better. Now, this is kind of boss specific, and we'll go over that when we get to bosses, but you know, it's kind of easy to get lost in the lobber trap and just do this for everything, you know? Like, you just use this one type of lobber trap. But in a lot of fights, you're going to use a visual cue or something like that of when to start your lobber trap. And you might even start with, like, a peak lobber like that, like max height. So one max height, and then go into this kind of bread and butter 2 lobbers per jump thing. That's a very common thing. And some lobber traps too, like when you know the boss is about to enter the arena, a good example is like minions coming out of Bonbon's gate. You don't really want these like high bouncing lobbers because they might walk under them at that point. So it might start off with something like a peak lobber, a couple of these, and then just a couple lobbers on the ground so that everything's kind of in the perfect spot for the boss when it comes on screen. But these are kind of like things to work towards, adding these more advanced lobber traps as you go. But the first thing to get good at is just this 2 lobbers per jump. and making sure that the heights are good on these. It's also, like I said, it's important to make sure you let go of shoot. You can kind of see on my input display that I'm timing my presses. So let me use the D-pad, that might be easier. Okay. Next up on the list is Flick Lobbers. So some more lobber tech here. Now, typically when you're, let's say this pillar's the boss, right? If I'm moving away from the boss, all my bullets are missing. Using spread or lobber, all my stuff's missing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to actually shoot the boss with a lobber, then immediately start turning to move away. And then as my lobbers become ready, I'm going to manually repress shoot as I turn back to the boss. So it's like bam, and you get this kind of effect. You can also do this in the air. It's a little bit harder. You can also do this with different angles, whatever you need to actually hit the boss. Now, a big tip with this is that when you're on the ground, you could also use the lock button as you turn. This makes it to where when I'm pressing right to look back at the boss to shoot a bullet, using lock keeps me from moving back right a little bit, so it helps me cover more ground, just make the movement more efficient. You obviously can't do this for the air ones. You just kind of have to deal with it, but yeah. Also, like I said, you could shoot these in any directions. So the Lobber Trap stuff that we just learned about, you could apply these during Lobber Traps. So this is the two, that bread and butter Lobber Trap I told you about, but I'm moving in between each shot. You typically won't use this, and this is also quite difficult to get to this point, to be able to do that. But there is some instances, like against Beppy or something, that you might actually use this type of Lobber Trap. But yeah, there's some Lobber tech for you. All right, now I want to go over some Lobber EX things. So as you know, if you hit a boss with a Lobber EX, it counts as a single. If you blow it up on the ground, though, next to a boss like that, it does double damage. Now, there's a way to combine these two things, where you do a diagonally down Lobber EX, typically, and the Lobber EX is perfectly positioned so that it hits both the ground and the boss at the exact same time. Now, the thing about this is usually there's only about 1 or 2 pixels in most cases that are good enough position for this. If you overstep this position and you're too close, then what will happen is the Lobber EX will just hit the boss. You get a single damage Lobber EX. Obviously, if you're too far back, you'll just get a double, which is kind of your normal Lobber EX. That's fine. But even if you're in the perfect position, there's essentially, because of game jank, Unity collision weirdness, there's only about a 50% chance that your Lobber EX will actually hit as a triple. The other 50% of the time, it'll hit as a double. So these are worth going for, especially on fights like this, where the potato does not move around. So you have plenty of time to try to line up a perfect Lobber EX. Let me see if I can get one here to demonstrate. This is also, if you remember the tiny step tech, this is where tiny steps become really useful. Like this. Tiny steps being just pressing forward and then immediately lock to try to inch forward. This is super useful for getting your positioning for something like this. And as you can see there, that hit for triple damage. So these are incredibly useful, and you will be using them some throughout the run. All right, next up, let's go over a big one, Kaleva Swaps. Now, I'm going to kind of recap over how Kaleva Swaps work, but also give detailed information on it. I think this is still important to know. So, an EX has 3 parts. The startup animation, which is right here, where I'm preparing an EX. Then, when the EX actually comes out. And then this recovery animation, where I still can't really do anything else, and I'm just recovering from the EX move that I just did. Now, different things happen at each of these points. So during the startup animation, the game stops my ability to shoot. When the EX comes out, the game counts this as having shot a bullet, so it'll set my weapon to a full cooldown. So let's say, for example, you had a Lobber bullet that was almost ready to fire off, but your EX move comes out. This completely wastes whatever cooldown you had essentially readied up there. And then on this recovery animation, if you had gained an ability to shoot, the game stops your ability to shoot yet again. Now, what's interesting is with Kaleva Swaps, you can basically press weapon swap after EX. See, that's regular Lobber that came out. Because when you press weapon swap, during the startup animation or the recovery animation, it will regain your ability to shoot again. So it kind of cancels out these moments where the game normally stops you from shooting. So your very normal Kaleva swap is you just press EX, immediately weapon swap, the EX comes out, and then you switch right back to spread shot. Like so. Now, there's something that's really important here, and that is that thing I told you about where when the EX move comes out, it counts as having shot a bullet. So what can happen is, let's say that I had recently been doing like flick lobbers or something, and I switched right to spread shot. So my lobber now is basically needs to recover completely. It's on like full cooldown. So if I go to do a Kaleva swap, I'll get no lobber. And that's because even though I switched to lobber, I regained my ability to shoot the lobber, my lobber cooldown just simply, it hasn't readied up enough to be able to fire a lobber off before the EX comes out. And what sucks about this is because the lobber was probably almost ready to fire, but the EX came out, it reset my cooldown, and so now I basically wasted all that time on lobber because the cooldown was just wasted by this EX coming out. So what's really important here to do is what I would like to call like lobber priming, where you're like readying up a lobber so that when you go to do a Kaleva swap, you've hovered on lobber just long enough so that it has used up, it's gotten like some of the cooldown to go away. So that way when you switch to lobber during your Kaleva swap, you'll have time to let out that lobber, ideally right before the EX. That's the perfect point for it to be. So an example is here. If I fire lobber and then immediately go to spread, this will not give me a lobber. So like this, I just used a lobber. No lobber came out there along with the EX. But if I fire a lobber and wait a little bit and then switch to spread, you can see a lobber came out. And that's because I basically, after shooting my last lobber shot, I hovered on lobber for just a little bit longer. You could think of it like a third of the cooldown, or half the cooldown if you want to be safe. And then that way, like, my lobber's like basically like a third of the way ready, halfway ready. And then when I go to do my Kaleva swap, that's enough so that I'll be able to let a lobber out right before the EX. Now, to optimize this as you go, the tighter this is, the better. So you can see right there, yeah, look at this. See how that lobber came out right before the EX? This is like ideal. This is what you want to eventually refine this and aim for. Because like I said, the lobber EX coming out counts as shooting a bullet. So any time like spent in between these two things, like your lobber coming out and the EX coming out, is like wasted time because your cooldown's going to get reset anyways. So this is like a really nice thing to have it where the lobber comes out and then the EX right away. Now, you can have these come out on the same frame, where the lobber and the lobber EX comes out on the same frame, and that's technically like the TAS perfect lobber EX or Kaleva swap. But this is more what you're aiming for, is the lobber to come out right before the EX. Just know that this will get you more damage. This is also something that's like an endless refining experience where you're just going to keep working on this in fights so that, you know, you're doing your flick lobber, but on that last lobber shot, I hovered on it a little bit so that when I go here, I get that lobber out right before the right before the EX comes out. So, all that being said, I know that's a lot of information. There's some different techniques to use with your Kaleva Swaps to kind of optimize for this, to try to set up your lobber in the perfect spot for each situation. So, one way to do this is to do your normal Kaleva Swap, swap back to spread as soon as the EX comes out. Now, in this case, because I switched to spread shut so quickly after the EX, it means my lobber is not going to be ready if I need to do another Kaleva Swap. So what you could do is something called G-Swaps. G-Swaps are when you're in this situation where you want to do another Kaleva Swap, but your lobber's not quite ready, so it won't be able to pop out on the next Kaleva Swap. It'll just be wasted, basically. So what you could do is just at any moment, just quickly swap the lobber and back to spread. And all that did was now, it readied up that lobber so that when I do my next Kaleva Swap, it fires off. Now, this is particularly useful when, for example, let's say you're fighting a boss that's high up. Like, maybe this A up here is like, imagine you're fighting like the Devil Phase 1, or you're against the Carrot on Group Pack. When you're at the bottom of your jump, your spread bullets is not hitting this, not hitting very well. So that's a perfect time to do one of these G-Swaps. So up here, you cut the Kaleva Swap tight, but then at the bottom of your jump, you do a G-Swap to prepare for your next Kaleva Swap. And you can see it was letting out a lobber on each one of those. The G-Swaps are mostly useful for that. But also just anytime you know that, like for example, let's say you're doing flick lobbers on a boss, and you switch to spread, you're doing spread for a while, but now you know your lobber's not quite ready for your next Kaleva Swap. You can just quickly do a G-Swap, ready up that lobber, and then fire it off. G-Swaps are very versatile, and it's basically something that you use when you want to do a Kaleva Swap, but you know your regular lobber shot is not prepared. It's not primed for that Kaleva Swap. Now, there's other ways to do this, and this goes into more different types of delays you can do on your normal Kaleva Swap. So right now, we've just been switching back to spread as soon as the EX comes out, like that. And I would think of that as a no delay. So I'm not delaying at all after the EX comes out to switch back to spread. I'm switching back to spread ASAP. But what you can do is what I would like to call a half delay. These are really nice. I like using these all over the place. Where instead of swapping like right here, as soon as the EX comes out, what I'll do instead is swap like here. So I'm already like halfway through the recovery animation of the EX move, and now I'm swapping back to spread. And all that does is it hovered on lobber just long enough before switching back to spread that it's ready. As you can see on this Kaleva Swap, I had it ready because of that previous one. And these are really good to practice. You can see I'm getting that lobber to pop out right before the EX on every one, and this is something you could kind of work on over time. Now, if you see something like this, where the lobber pops out way before the EX, that means your lobber was too ready. And if you see this, where no lobber comes out, that means you didn't hover on lobber long enough previously. You haven't readied up your lobber enough. But yeah, these are a really good thing to try to get the feel of, this timing. To try to get those lobbers to pop out ideally right before the EX. Now, there's another one which I would call, instead of the half delay, I'd call it the full delay. And this is particularly useful most of the time when you're setting up for like a triple damage EX and you're angling down right. So your priority isn't really to get back to spread shot because you're shooting spread shot into the ground. So what you can do is go for your Kaleva Swap, but then don't swap back until you fire off a Lobber. So it'd be like this. Let's see. Let me set it up. And what that does is because you would be shooting spread bullets into the ground, you're switching back to spread sooner doesn't really help. So instead, you just stay on Lobber for a while, and you just fire off a Lobber into the boss. Like, let's say this pillar's the boss. I fire that Lobber off, and then I switch back to spread, and I continue up DPS. Whereas if I switch to spread sooner, you can see a lot of these bullets would be going straight into the ground and not really hitting the boss well at all. So that's why it's better in this case to do a full delay and just kind of like let that use that time to prepare Lobber, let it out, and then switch back to spread. Oops. See there, I didn't delay long enough. There we go. And that's when I would switch back to spread. Like that. So that's a full delay. Now, of course, because I'm shooting a Lobber and then switching right back to spread shot, this means my Lobber is on full cooldown. So if I wanted to set up another one of these Kaleva Swaps, I'd have to do a G swap, like mentioned earlier, to prepare that Lobber. Or you could do what I sometimes, this is a very rare one, so this one's not that important to practice, but it's something I like to do on like Goopy and like on Piruletta and the King Dice fights, where you do a extended delay. And this is a similar situation where you're going for a triple. But when I let the Lobber out, I still stay on Lobber a little bit longer to set up for another Kaleva Swap. So I would do something like that, where I kind of waited an extra bit long to switch back to spread. So that way, when I go for this Kaleva Swap, my Lobber's ready. So that's a lot to take in. But these are all kinds of different ways that you can optimize your normal Kaleva Swaps. Now, thankfully, the same weapon Kaleva Swaps, which is where, like, let's say you're on spread and you want to spread EX, or you're on Lobber and you want a Lobber EX, these are a little bit more simpler. There's not as many variations. And also I wanted to add, like, with all those variations and stuff, like, just focus on getting good at the Kaleva Swaps and trying to get those Lobbers to, like, pop out right before the EX. Just work on that over time, on managing your cooldown and getting a feel for that. And you can start, optimizing in all these different variations, which during some of these boss fights, I'll be mentioning some of these variations where I like to use them and stuff. But yeah, just take it one step at a time. If your Lobber EXs look like this, where the Lobber comes out way early, hey, at least you're getting a Lobber. That's better than not getting any Lobber. So over time, you can kind of refine this and get better at the timing so that you can get those Lobbers more closely spaced to your EX to optimize your damage. But let's go over the same weapon Kaleva Swaps. So first, I'll do Lobber. With Lobber, what you want to do, and this is part because of the cooldown thing, is you want to wait until about the halfway point of your Lobber cooldown. So shoot a Lobber. Let's say you're just like, you're shooting over at Grim or something, right? Shoot your Lobber. Wait about half the cooldown. And then what you want to do is you want to press EX and you want to press swap, weapon swap 2 times quickly. Oops. like that. And what that will do is because you swap twice, it will switch to Lobber. It'll switch back to Lobber. You'll let out that Lobber shot. That's why we kind of, like I said, wait half the cooldown, maybe a little more than half the cooldown, so that when I do the 2 swaps, but it will basically give me time to let out that one regular Lobber right before the EX, and then the Lobber EX move will come out. Now, you don't... I know I said that you lose your ability to shoot after the EX move comes out, like while you're in the recovery animation, and that is true, but you don't need to do any more swaps here, because Lobber is such a slow weapon that your whole recovery animation will be done by the time you're ready to shoot your next Lobber. So you don't have to worry about the recovery animation at all. You could just stay on Lobber and keep holding shoot. So that's the nice thing about these. Now, these can be difficult to worry about the cooldown. Like, let's say you're doing some intense boss fight things. It can be tough when you're trying to use EX to hover in the air and position and aim all this stuff to worry about this cooldown so that you still get that Lobber to come out a little before the EX does. Again, these are just things to refine over time. You don't have to worry about it too much. At first, just try to press EX and press weapon swap 2 times fast. That's to get, to get started. And then optimize the Lobber cooldown as you go. Now, next up, we have same weapon, spread Kaleva Swaps. So for these, it's the same kind of idea. Thankfully, because spread shot's such a fast weapon, we don't have to worry about the cooldown stuff at all. Outside of one little tip that I'll give. So with these, you want to start off by pressing EX and then weapon swap twice really quick, just like with the Lobber one. But with spread shot, it is a fast weapon. So that recovery animation, stopping our ability to shoot, is actually really bad. So what we want to do is, after the EX move comes out, we want to weapon swap 2 more times. So you can see me, if you watch my weapon swap thing in the bottom left there, I'm going to press EX, weapon swap twice, the EX move is going to come out, and then I'm going to weapon swap 2 more times to end up back on spread. And this just kind of optimizes for all the different parts of the EX. Now, the last thing I do want to mention about this is sometimes, like, you're doing a spread EX on a boss, and you're, like, either finishing a phase off, or you're finishing the boss off. And so one thing I like to do is... I'll go to Root Pack to demonstrate this. Because you're swapping a total of 4 times, that means you're hovering on Lobber twice. So you're spending some time on the Lobber shot, and sometimes it will let out the Lobber shot. It just depends on what your cooldown was at. But sometimes, if your Lobber was, like, far from ready, you won't let out a Lobber shot. And so this is something I'll keep an eye on. I'll demonstrate this on Potato. Let me get myself invincibility here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the splash of a Lobber hitting. So I saw a Lobber splash hit there, but let me do something like this. There, I only saw red during the EX. I saw no Lobber splash. So what that tells me is because I spent time on Lobber when I did those 4 swaps and no Lobber came out, that means that my Lobber is almost ready. So what I would do, because I think the boss is almost dead, in this case he already died, I would just do like a quick swap to Lobber and back to spread just to let the Lobber out, like that. Because I know I didn't see any Lobber splash during that spread EX, and I know that means that I spent time on Lobber, but I didn't actually get to have time to let out my Lobber shot. So I will try to let that Lobber out real quick, because often that'll help me finish the boss off just slightly faster. I've already invested time into priming that Lobber during that EX. It just wasn't quite enough time in that specific instance. I noticed no Lobber splash, so I'm going to do that quick double tap to kind of let that Lobber out. But sometimes it'll be ready enough. there, I saw a little lobber splash, and so I know, okay, I used up my lobber. I don't even have to worry about doing that. I already made good use of my DPS. So yeah, that's it for that. And yeah, Kaleva Swaps, they're a big thing. They're one of the most complex and difficult things to optimize over time. Like I said, just take it one step at a time. Try to get good at the basics. And then, you know, as you go forward, you could be like, all right, you know, for this spot, I want to do a half delay or a full delay Kaleva swap, or, you know, I'm worrying about this lobber cooldown on my same weapon spread EXs, and that stuff you can get better at over time. But next up, let's move to the plane level just for a minute to talk about Luigi Swaps. Now, thankfully, these are a bit more simple. But that doesn't mean they're easy to do. Also for this, I'm going to switch over something. All right, so I switched over to the keyboard. This is something I do because of a technique called Luigi Swaps that I'm about to explain. Just real quick, I use the arrow keys for movement. I use the space bar for shooting. I use shift for shrink, A for parry, S for weapon swap, and D for the EX move. So, Luigi Swaps are a very similar idea to Kaleva Swaps. So normally, you can see I'm shooting bullets, but when I press EX, I stop shooting. And it also applies all the same stuff. Now, the difference here, by same stuff, I mean like when the EX comes out, it counts as having shot a bullet, which this is relevant for mini bombs, which are kind of like your lobber in the plane levels. You know, it's a very slow thing, so the mini bomb EXs could waste a lot of this cooldown, similar to the Kaleva swap thing. But yeah. The difference here is you can't actually weapon swap once you've started an EX. You see I'm pressing weapon swap, but it wouldn't let me switch until the EX was completely over with. But you can get around this by doing a frame perfect trick. Really, it's a same frame trick. So what you need to do is you need to press weapon swap and EX at the same exact frame, same exact time. So, and that will allow you to continually shoot your gun, even during the EX animation. This is incredibly useful. It gains you a lot of damage. A very typical situation that you'll do with this is you'll be on bullet, and you'll want to do a bullet EX. So what you'll do is you'll weapon swap over to mini bomb, and then you'll press weapon swap EX at the same time to Luigi swap back to a bullet EX. So I'll switch to mini bomb like this, and then I will press weapon swap and EX to come back to bullet with a Luigi swap. Except you'll do this much quicker like this. Now with these in particular, if a boss is about to leave or die, I will take note of my mini bomb cooldown because I am swapping to mini bomb for a little bit of time during these Luigi swaps. So I know I'm kind of priming a mini bomb. And so in this case, I will know that I have a mini bomb almost ready. And even if I'm not doing another Luigi swap and like the boss is about to leave or something, I might just switch over to mini bomb and back to bullet real quick to just make sure I let out that mini bomb and get use of all that damage. Now for the mini bomb version of this, you want to wait until your mini bomb is about halfway through, and then do one. It's the same idea as with the Lobber EX related stuff. So I'm gonna wait until the mini bomb cooldown is about halfway over, and then I'm gonna do a Luigi swap input here. And the goal being, let's see. that the mini bomb comes out right before the EX. Actually, you don't even need to wait for like half the cooldown. It's like a third of the cooldown of your mini bomb. Like even that was too long. So it's honestly, it's barely any mini bomb cooldown at all. I always thought of it about as a third, but it might even be like a fourth of the cooldown or something is all you need to hover on since your last mini bomb to prime it and prepare it for one of these mini bomb Luigi Swaps. Also, while we're here, that kind of covers Luigi Swaps and all that. It is just another one of those things you're just gonna have to get good at. Button layout matters a lot for this. That's why I use keyboard, because on keyboard this is very convenient for me. You can do it on controller, but if you're gonna do it on controller, you'll want EX and weapon swap to be on face buttons. So like A, B, X, Y on Xbox controller, or like square, triangle, cross, circle. Like those are face buttons. You would want those two, your EX and weapon swap to be on those, so you could kind of just use your thumb or to press both at the same time. Otherwise, it's really hard. Like if you're using default ground controls, it's really hard to use the left bumper, weapon swap, and the EX at the same time when you have EX on like Y or B or whatever. So yeah, that's why I use keyboard. But yeah, you don't have to. It just depends on what you prefer for button layout. While we're here on the plane level, let me just talk about some different stuff. Just know that your bullets have travel time. So let's say a boss is about to appear over here. You don't want to be here waiting for him to come up shooting bullets. You want to be all the way back here because you're getting more bullets on screen. So by the time the boss appears, there's going to be all these bullets already spawned in and hitting him. Also, the reverse applies if the boss is about to leave. Like, let's say this little parry's the boss, and I know he's about to leave. You'll want to get close like this, because you want as many of your bullets to hit him immediately as you can before he gets away. Whereas if I'm all the way back here and he goes away, all these bullets that I've spawned in, they'll not be able to reach him in time because I'm so far away. So that's why I want to close the gap when they're about to go. Another good thing too is like when you know a boss is about to leave or something, it's good to, if you know you have a mini bomb almost ready or whatever, it's good to make use of that mini bomb cooldown and just let a mini bomb out on the boss right before they get away. So yeah, just some little optimizations there. Oh yeah, one more plane optimization too that's kind of useful is doing this. When you're on mini bomb and you mini plane, you won't actually shoot bullets. You hear the sound of it, but you won't. Instead, what the game's doing is it's refreshing your mini bomb cooldown. So you can unshrink and let a mini bomb out and then reshrink. This is kind of a good way to optimize your mini plane DPS when you can, to give you some more mobility or ability to dodge while still kind of prepping your next mini bomb, which is like, you know, obviously really good damage. Also some other random plane notes that I just thought of. Half of the mini bomb's damage is on contact, and the other half is from the splash damage, like a bit of an explosion around it. The splash damage part does not generate cards. So what this kind of means is that the mini bomb generates EX cards at about half the speed of bullet, and that's because of the splash damage not generating cards. So the splash damage can be incredibly useful, like on Dr. Cal Phase 1, where you can use the splash to kind of hit multiple things, but typically you're going to be just prioritizing using bullet, and just kind of using your mini bombs cooldown efficiently or in the spots that they count, or because you're doing Luigi Swaps and preparing it. Also, I forgot to mention that you can do this with a nuke as well. I don't use a nuke like almost ever. None of my optimal strats use a nuke. But it is just good to know that you can do the Luigi Swap inputs and continually shoot while a nuke. And it does work with mini bombs or bullet. You could do these with mini bombs too. But yeah, back to some ground level stuff. All right, so back on the ground levels. One thing I wanted to say is I kind of alluded to this on the plane levels, but just be aware of your slower weapons cooldown. Like with the mini bombs, you know, you want to make use of the Lobber cooldown. I kind of went over it on how to optimize it for Kaleva Swaps, but also just like, you know, let's say you just know that you have a Lobber almost ready and a boss is about to die or a phase is about to end. You know, feel free to just switch to Lobber until one pops out and then get back on spread. Spread's obviously more damage, but if you've already readied up your Lobber or some at some point, it's good to kind of make use of it. Also, like, if you know, like, let's say this pillar's a boss, you know the boss is about to be dead, you don't want to be back here. Ideally, you want to be up close. Just reduce the bullet travel time as much as you can when you know a phase or a boss is about to die. If, you know, you're able, you know, sometimes a boss, you don't exactly know when it's going to die or whatever, and yeah. So maybe you're playing it a little safe and being a little further back. Another thing, just know that, like, as you deal damage, you generate cards. And this is very consistent, the amount you generate. So you can use this as a sort of DPS tracking, where you know, like, okay, I've generated 2.5 cards. I know this phase is almost dead, or something of the sort. And this can help you time, like, or know when a boss is going to die, or, like, how to end things off appropriately. Now, your EX moves, the damage from your EX moves does not generate cards, so that kind of always has to be factored into the equation. But this is, like, boss-specific stuff. We'll kind of go over that when we get there. Now, I do want to go over some fun little mechanics. Normally, when you EX at the edge like this, you'll get pushed off. Like that, and you'll actually quick fall. But one thing you can do, if you hold lock and, like, forward, in this case, lock and forward when you do an EX, you won't get scooted off. This can actually be kind of useful in some cases. An example could be, like, on Honey Bottoms is the main case, where you could kind of use some spread EXs and get yourself pushed to the very edge of a platform into a safe spot and not actually fall off from the EX. So that's kind of just a useful little thing to know. Also, bullet displacement. So normally you can see the bullet would come out there, but with bullet displacement, I can make a bullet come out from behind me, which is kind of fun. Once you move, it'll cancel this effect. But how to get the effect is dash and tap the opposite direction that you dash. So in this case, I'm dashing left and tapping right during the dash. And then let go. You don't want to hold any other direction, and this will engage the bullet displacement. A neat property of this is when you EX, the EX will actually push you forward instead of backwards, which is kind of fun. I use this for exactly one strat, which is on Sally. It's not really that big of a deal, but I figured I would mention it because it's kind of a fun little thing to know about. Next up is some movement stuff. So when you dash, there is a cooldown before you can dash again. You can see I'm just mashing the dash button, but I'm not, like, dashing instantly every time. Now, you can reset this dash cooldown immediately by either jumping or landing on the ground. So here's a case of landing to reset it, or you could do what we like to call a jump dash, where you're using a jump and immediately dashing, which these you actually have to time to get your dash cooldown back, and then you kind of rinse and repeat. So you alternate it in a dash, jump dash fashion, just like so. Dash, jump dash, and just keep alternating these. These will get you a little more speed. You're typically only ever going to use this tech in Forest Follies or other run and guns if you decide to run all flags or something. but for the sake of this any percent category, it's mainly going to be Enforced Follies. Some other stuff I want to go over is damage boosting. Getting hit in this game can be a little bit weird. I'll just go on the root pack to demonstrate this. But typically, if you're on the ground and you get hit, you'll just get knocked back a little bit. Backwards from the direction you're facing. So if I'm facing left, see, I got damage boosted towards the right instead. So it knocks you not backwards from where the collision took place, but backwards from the direction you're facing. So, like, for example, let's say I dash into the potato here. I'll get knocked backwards. You can see where I end up after that. But one thing you can do is while you're dashing, you can hold the opposite direction, and that'll switch direction once on contact and damage boost you in the other way. So you can see how much further in the potato that puts me there. So that could be kind of useful. You can also do this in the air to gain a little more distance. This could be useful for some strats. It's kind of good to know. Other things is when you're jumping and you get hit, different things happen at different jump heights, and this can be a little finicky, but there's one in particular that I really like doing, which is where you jump and immediately get hit. Like this. Because you get this weird, like, mid-air bounce. So this can be really useful because this hovers you into the air really well, and it's a very controllable way to damage boost into a boss without something really weird happening. Like, for example, sometimes when you get hit later into your jump, you'll fall down very quickly. This is especially the case if you're in an EX animation. You kind of just fall straight down. This is kind of just good stuff to know when it comes for how damage boosting works. For some fights like Honey Bottoms or Grim and stuff, when you might be doing a lot of damage boost, this can be very relevant. And this one in particular is super useful for like Honey Bottoms. All right, next up, I want to talk about some things in Cuphead that can go wrong. There's unfortunately some frame-perfect tricks that are bad. One is jump blocking. So right there, I got one. If you try to jump the same frame that you land, it will eat your jump input. You will not jump. And also, oddly enough, it'll buffer a parry. So here, I'm going to press jump, and you'll see an instant parry comes out. That's how you know you got jump blocked. So this can be rough because sometimes you're trying to greed some tight jumps, and you'll end up with a jump block because of it, like that. So it's something to play around. You just gotta get really consistent and good at your jump timings. Next up is nothing EXs. Let me see if I can get one here. These happen by... like that. These happen by pressing weapon swap the same frame that the EX move tries to come out. It will just not give you an EX and waste your card. And these could happen when you're trying to do Kaleva Swaps and the timing's cut. You kind of cut the timing a bit tight. Too tight. You can end up with a nothing EX. So that's another one of those things you just have to kind of play around. Next up is another EX thing. If you are looking one way and you swap to a diagonal and press EX on the same frame, you'll get that. It's called like a butt EX or something. But for some reason, if you switch directions to a diagonal, the same frame that you press EX, it will shoot it in the opposite diagonal that you're facing. So this is just another one of those things to kind of keep in mind that you might have to kind of play around. Next up, I want to go over, though, is just a few scoreboard things to keep in mind, so I'll snap over to that. All right, so for the scoreboard here, you can see that it starts ticking up the timer. Now, on all these things, on time, on HP bonus, on parry, super meter, it takes time to count these things in. And especially if it has to count up multiple ticks, so like time especially is the case, you want to be mashing your A button on controller or X button. I believe it's like, I think it's Z on keyboard. It might even just be whatever your jump button is if you're a keyboard player. I'm not 100% sure on that. But find out basically the button that locks in. It kind of will snap in the stuff like that. So that way it doesn't have to tick all the way through because you will lose time on the scoreboard there. Other things is it will completely skip over something if you didn't get any of that thing. Typically this will be the case of why we might skip parries on some fights, is maybe you only could get 1 or 2 parries and it doesn't really save that much time to get them. In the scoreboard, it takes about 0.8 seconds, even if it's only like 1 parry or something for it to count the parries. Sometimes you'll be going for like a parry skip strat just to save the time at the scoreboard. Now, the other thing is at the bottom, there's one thing that's different here, and it's skill level. There's 2 stars on regular difficulty. And basically, when I was talking about those like instant snap in things, on HP bonus, parry, and super meter, that's a 2-frame window. And typically we just bash the A button, but you could also time them to snap those in. But skill level, it's frame perfect. So there's a 1/60th of a second timing that if you press the A button, both stars will appear at the exact same time. Now, this is extremely difficult to time because there's no visual cue. Some players do opt to time it, but what I personally do is, you can see my A button here, I just mash the A button a lot. Now, of course, be careful with this. With any kind of mashing technique, you can cause problems with your hands, wrists, etc. So just don't go too hard on it, unless you have like a really good technique you're comfortable with. I personally use a sliding technique where I basically curve 2 fingers inwards, so my pointer and my middle finger, and I use the kind of the back of the nail of those fingers and just slide them both over the button. I also make sure there's a gap in between my pointer and middle finger, so that way there's kind of space for the A button to be released as I slide over. And yeah, I just slide back and forth. And what's nice about this is it produces a lot of A presses, and you can still have a very relaxed hand. But it can be a little bit weird to get used to, and some controllers it'll work on better than others. Otherwise, you could just use like 1 finger to mash, but this technique can be a little more damaging if you're not used to it. So yeah, those are just kind of some ideas for that. So I'm gonna just mash this scoreboard. Okay, there I did not get a star skip, but if you get a star skip, both stars will appear at the same exact time, and this saves, I believe it's 58 frames or 0.96 seconds. So basically it saves a full second for every star skip you get. And this matters on every scoreboard in the game except for the devil, because the timer stops as soon as you beat the devil instead of at the scoreboard. But yeah, just mash through the scoreboard on your relevant button that snaps things in. If you don't want to mash because you don't, like, your technique isn't great for it, or it gives you hand problems, then just try to learn the timing of when each thing will snap in. And also, yeah, just keep in mind that the scoreboard does matter, and that's why we skip parries and stuff on some of the fights. Oh, boy. Next up is Grandpa Kettle. Where to even begin on this one? Nah, you know what? You're on your own with this one. Let's just move on. All right, and while I planned on making this all into one big video, I found out my PC cannot handle editing together a video that's extremely long. So I'm gonna be cutting this up in parts, and this concludes the tech part of the tutorial. Congratulations if you made it through all that, and good luck practicing all these things. Again, just take it step by step. And yeah, this should be hopefully in a playlist. If not, there will be a part 2 linked down below, which will get us into Aisle 1. I'll see you there. Have a good one. Bye-bye.